Welcome to today's episode. I'm your host, Reed Stone, and alongside me is my co-host, Bob Foley. Our guest today is Robert Laura. Bob is the retirement activist who is committed to changing the way people think about and prepare for every aspect of retirement. And his work on the non-financial aspects challenges the status quo of traditional retirement planning. He is a best-selling author, a nationally syndicated columnist, and president of Wealth and Wellness Group. He is also the founder of the Retirement Coaches Association and the Certified Professional Retirement Coach designation, the CPRC. His latest work, developing the Retirement Quotient or RQ assessment, continues to challenge the status quo of retirement. Learning more about what the assessment is, how it works, and how it helps people plan for retirement is the topic of our show today. Welcome, Bob. Thanks for joining us.
Reed, Bob, good to be here. I'm excited.
Yeah, good. So as I was preparing for the show, a couple of things that I've come across recently dawned on me, and I wanted to get both of your thoughts on these two things, and I think it really ties in well with what the RQ assessment does for people as they plan for retirement. So the first thing is there's a lot of talk, particularly in the financial advice industry, around the term retirement readiness. But retirement readiness is often focused on just the financial aspects. So I just saw an article last week posted online from a very large, nationally recognized financial advisory firm. Hey, take our retirement readiness assessment. But if you look at it and dig through it, it's all about the financial aspects. And so I question that because we know that people can't really truly be ready for retirement if they only look at the money. What people often don't realize is that the non-financial aspects can be much more challenging for people to plan for. The financial side is, for a lot of people, cut and dried, and it's easier to wrap our heads around that. But the emotional side of retirement for a lot of people can be much more challenging. And I believe that, at least from my experience, is that the non-financial aspects of retirement are more impactful on people's satisfaction in retirement than the financial side is. So again, people can understand the financial side, but I think that non-financial side is hard for people to wrap their head around. They don't know what all the topics are. They don't know how to plan for it. The other thing that I've read about recently, and this has come out from two research studies, is the concept of the retirement disconnect, or people being disconnected from what's important to plan for in retirement, what retirees tell us we should plan for, and what pre-retirees really plan for. And so two studies. So Edward Jones and AgeWave has come out with some studies talking about the retirement disconnect. And then also Stanford Center on Longevity has just done a series of studies on that topic. So I want to share a slide with you guys and then get your thoughts on retirement readiness and the retirement disconnect. So let's take a look at this one first. So figure 30 here talks about the retirement planning disconnect, and what AgeWave and Edward Jones did is they asked retirees what is important, or do you believe is important to plan for in retirement, and also pre-retirees what they thought was important to plan for. And as you can see, the retirees, if we look below the gray line there, we talk about things like living a healthy life, finding activities that give us a sense of purpose, meaning, and fulfillment, and then how to maintain or improve family relationships. And I would add social relationships into that being important as well. But we can see from looking at this that there's a huge disconnect between, again, what retirees know is important and what pre-retirees plan for. And then on the right side of this, I just added this in here because this is another stat from that study, is 54% of retirees wish they had done better planning for the non-financial aspects of retirement. I'll, I'll cite one more stat from this study, and that is that 77% of respondents wish there were more resources available to help them plan for an ideal retirement beyond just their finances. And I think that's exactly, Bob, where the RQ assessment comes in. It can help people with both their retirement readiness, and also we can make that disconnect a little smaller for people. So both of you, share any thoughts on both of those topics?
I got a million thoughts. So I think I think, financial service firms, and I'm a financial advisor, they continue to hijack the term retirement readiness, retirement wellness. Just because you have money does not mean you're well. And it's just this perception that if you've got these things, and this is just how we've been brainwashed for the last 20 or 30 years. And I rightfully so. I mean, if you go back in time and look at the history of retirement, when the 401k was supposed to support the pension, it got pulled out. So there is understanding why there's so much focus on the financial, but it's wrong at this point. So they've hijacked the term and they set people up to fail. And then nobody can say they're failing at retirement because you have enough money not to work and you have all the time to do what you want. The other thing I think advisors miss, and this is huge, because if statistically you look at the number of people who work with an advisor and have a financial plan, it's only about 45%, especially people who are 50 plus. Right. It's because it's so complex. And so they don't want to do it. And even in a situation with a couple, there's usually one who gets the numbers and one who doesn't like it. So you're only addressing half the battle. And so I think it's a combination of saying, hey, there's more to retirement than just money, but also the best way to get to the complex end, which to replace their income, is to figure out how they're going to replace their work identity, fill their time, stay relevant, connected, mentally and physically active, express their spiritual needs, all the things that go into the non-financial pieces.
And they really have to get ready for their second career 60s because they need a purpose. Then when they get into their 70s, it's their bucket list 70s because they want to do the things that they've always wanted. They want to go to places they've always wanted to go to. And then you kind of slide into your 80s, and that's your aches and pains 80s. And if you haven't done enough in your 50s and your 60s to prepare for that, then your health is not going to be the best. And that's why they become the aches and pains 80s. And then if you make it this far, the last hurrah 90s. And that's when you really decide what your legacy is going to be, the things that you want to be known for, the things that you want to make sure happen for your grandkids, your kids, your family, etc. And all of these things I've just talked about, those 4 decades, really need to be planned when you're in your 50s. Because when you're in your reflective 50s, that's when you start to think about what my life is going to be like moving forward in a completely different way than you've ever thought about it before, because it's going to be completely different.
Yeah. And I think real quick, I have to, again, what I think advisors and people, a lot of anyone in financial services, whether it's wholesalers or other people, what Bob just says, it's framework. What I'm talking about is processes. Like, it's not shocking or amazing or super hard. No one's got to go get a master's degree in therapy to figure this stuff out. It's just, how do we talk about it? How do we write it down? And how do we plan for it?
Right. Okay, let's jump into the RQ assessment, Bob. But before we jump into it, maybe talk about specific questions of what it is and how it works. Give us a little sense of the history of, why did you decide to create the assessment? And then what's been the process of getting the assessment? This thing just rolled out a few months ago, so it's relatively new. It's one of the reasons Bob and I wanted to share this with everybody, is because it's something that's new that people can use to plan for this non-financial side of retirement.
Yeah, so really, it dates back a long time. I've been doing this kind of work for 15 years, which is surprising to people because it's only become popular recently. But really, since I've been ultra involved in it the last 6 or 7 years, there just was a gap. And there wasn't a tool that raised people's awareness about the non-financial side. But here's the key, the more important thing. It really helps reflect a person's personality. So here's the reality. There's no single best way to retire. What I hate about the research that's out there, and I am a researcher as well, turning in other things, is it's very generalized that, you need a strong social network. You need to be healthy. You need to be this or that. Well, it's different if you're an extrovert versus an introvert. If you have kids or grandkids, or you're a solo ager. If you're married, divorced, or widowed, if you're male or female, there's no single best way. And so what we really have to do is figure out a way to lay over your self-described personality, preferences, and beliefs over the transition. Now, the other thing that you guys know as well as I do from all of our experience is why people fail at retirement. Because really, success is elusive at a lot of stages of life. And so if we can back into it and practically say, where do people take these missteps? And here's the beauty, I think, of the assessment. It took over 2 years to create. We started with 180 questions, and we got it down to 56 because we didn't want some scientifically validated program. And nothing against that, but no one wants to take another 180 question test that asks you the same question 3 times to make sure it's verified. And what we needed was a practical application that was based on common sense, empirical evidence, research, and what we know about people that just said, let's pause, let's see who you are, what is important to you, and lay that over what happens in the transition, because it's a minefield of change. It's a huge, and like people are like, oh, it's all great and easy. It's not. It can be a great time, but you do have to plan. And so a lot has gone into it, and where we're currently at is, the initial launch. It is a pre-retirement version. So this is people who are not retired yet, or maybe like, let's say 3 months into retirement. We are coming out with a post-retirement version that's, again, designed for someone who's 1, 3, 5, or 7 years into it, because obviously there's differences, but this version it's been eye-opening because, again, we get to really see how different people are answering these questions and how they're scoring for their preparedness. And I mean, not too surprising. And again, I don't want this to sound negative, but a lot of people aren't prepared because no one's really told them how to. So again, it's double-edged, sort of like, hey, most people aren't prepared, but it's just no one's doing the work. And so it's an important piece. I'm excited about where we're at with it.
And what's very, very interesting that I found is that one of the first things that people say to me when they start to take a look at retirement coaching is, no one ever told me about this. I never in my life ever gave this a second thought. And all of a sudden now here I am. So what do I do?
Yeah, and I think I always like to joke around. I wish I could say I was some genius and I came up with these amazing things, but really there just was a void, right? Nobody was doing this. And again, I don't want to, downplay it, but it really, when you really dig into it, this is life-changing stuff. And it's simply because anytime we know that we talk about it, let alone write it down, it becomes much more powerful. And I think the other thing is that, like, especially for financial advisors, we are in a position of influence. And if we can influence someone's life and improve their transition, that's so much more important than returning anything on a portfolio. Because no one's ever said, Bob, stop making me money, man. Woo, there's just too much money in there. Do not make me any more. They don't. They're never going to say that. And I think the average age of the advisor now is like 55 or 56. And there's a real opportunity to recognize that there's a lot of successful advisors out there, but how do we become more significant? Success lasts one lifetime, significance lasts multiple. How do we impact multiple people, multiple generations? And it's with the non-financial and tools like the RQ.
And a lot of that really reflects back on the world of work right now, because the world of work has decided that we have an expiration date of 65 years old on all of our foreheads. So once you hit that expiration date, if you haven't planned for that, in other words, deciding what your new life purpose of work, or to really keep your time all kind of gelling and to get yourself, one of the biggest things in retirement is you have to be on a schedule. You have to know exactly what you're going to do when you're going to do it, because when you were in the world of work, that's the way it happened. So you need to replace that. And in order to replace that, you got to give that some thought, and you got to give that some planning. And you need both financial planning there and emotional planning there.
Okay, great.
So Bob, take us through both the components that go into the RQ, so the formula, and then also take us through how the RQ assessment is laid out. There's basically 3 sections. So talk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, so there's kind of three different. There's actually four areas. So one of the first areas is a self-reporting description of yourself. And so what we like to do is lay in and identify: are you, a type A or type B? Are you left brain? Are you right brain? Are you a person who considers yourself an introvert or an extrovert? Do you, like processes and structure, or do you like to kind of go with the flow? Do you have a plan to volunteer, or do you have a workout routine? Because we want to kind of see where you're at. Because what's interesting is that sometimes people aren't the same people they are at home as they are at work. And so one of the first questions we ask is, how reflective is this of you, and what's different about your work life and your personal life? Because if they're different, or even if they're the same, it doesn't mean it's going to transfer easily. And so it just allows us to have some discussion about who they are. And again, that's not a typical conversation for anything to do with retirement, but as you learn more about a person, one of the key parts about the RQ report is we want to identify any variances between your current beliefs, personality, and patterns and what you're going to be like in retirement. Because a lot of people think that they're going to step over this magical line, the heavens are going to open up, and they're going to be this amazing new person. Well, you're not. You're going to be the same you times two, right? Behavioral economics says we default. We know what we do, what we know. And so it's not that, again, retirement can't be amazing or great, but it's what we know is that ultimately after a short period, you're going to default. And so we just want to measure, to your own self, who you think you are and what's important to you, and lay that over the transition. So that's really the eye-opening start. That's just a conversation, right? And then we move to the scoring sections. And the first section is the IQ. And so we did come up with, kind of an equation to understand it. It's IQ plus EQ plus SQ plus AQ equals RQ. And it sounds like a lot, but IQ is how much do you know about the actual transition? What's involved? What can really happen? I'm going to give this away because most people don't know that retirement is one of the top 10 most stressful life events. And just knowing that kind of changes your perception about it. So we want to get people's thoughts and ideas about it. And so that has to do with the IQ. And then we go into a work life section and then a personal life section. And in both of those, we look at the emotional quotient. Like, again, there's a lot of thoughts and feelings that just come out in this transition. And like some are going to be expected, some unexpected, but how do you manage that? SQ is spiritual quotient. Again, that's more about values and beliefs. And then RQ is really the adversity quotient or resiliency. And again, there's a lot of change that happens. So how resilient are you? And we measure that again in both work life and personal life. And then the combination of the IQ or the personal knowledge, the work life, and then the personal life culminates into a full RQ score. And not to be too, but it's sort of like a credit score, whereas it's not like every single question gets 5 or 10 points. And it was interesting because when we first rolled this out, we had it on a scale of 0 to 100. And again, most people were scoring, say, 55 or 60, and they immediately applied school logic and thought they failed. Well, no one's going to get a 1, no one's going to get 100. So we did have to adjust the scale. So it's now 0 to 1395 as a score range. And we generally find people who come in over 1,000 are on a better path, but we want to ideally see them around 1,100, but it's not uncommon to see scores. A majority of the scores are in the 850 to 950 range.
And I think you said earlier, Bob, so there's 56 questions. It takes most people only about 20 minutes to take the assessment.
We really haven't. I think people are down below 10 minutes.
10 minutes. Okay.
It's fairly, we say 15 to 20 because we don't want you to rush through it, obviously. But obviously, we can see how much time people are spending in there. So
okay,
it's pretty quick because, it's for you. It's not really like this, like, hey, I need this to win I'm not going to win a Nobel Prize, but you know what I mean? Like, I don't need this to be magical or amazing or be like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like, it's really it's practical. It's very common sense. So sorry, but it doesn't take long.
So what happens when somebody takes it it creates, I think it's a 15-page report that takes the information, presents it, explains it in these 15 pages. So how does a person who takes the RQ assessment, how do they best go through the results from the RQ assessment? Not by themselves, right?
Yeah, so there's two ways to really take it. So if someone just wants to go through and take it, they pay $29 and they can take it, and then we have a suite of coaches that will, follow up with them for a 30-minute conversation. The trick is that, like, with the 15 pages, there's a lot there.
Yeah.
And left on your own to kind of sort through it just can feel like a lot. And so obviously we have trained coaches who can kind of guide you through it and help you understand it. Because like any assessment, there might be something you're like, oh, I was unsure of that answer, or I answered this way, but I was thinking this. And that's just important stuff to talk about. And so to have someone to do that with, and then we also have the option to do a group discussion. So sometimes people just want to kind of hear what other people are doing. So that's if you pay to go through it. If you have a coach who went through the training and who has access, then you have that option as well, where they will then guide you through it. So a lot of coaches either include it in their coaching package or have it as part of a workshop. So they have that option to go through it. But it's a hefty report. There's a lot of information. What we say is, even if you just read through that, you're likely going to increase your RQ score by 10 to 15%. But again, based on whether you just go through the 30 minutes or you even hire a coach afterwards, it's well worth your while just to get an expert's insight into, you've kind of gone this far. It's not much to go down that next path.
Yeah, I think it's good to walk through the report with somebody who understands the information, to put some context to it. So,
well, it's just like a financial plan, right? An advisor can hand you a 100-page document, like, there you go, good luck. But if you don't understand, is inflation in there? What's the cost of living? What if I want to work part-time? What about this? I mean, there's 1,000 things. And now we're taking one component, financial. Now we're taking the other, mental, social, physical, spiritual, and amp that up by 25 questions each. And it's more important than ever to really just get a sense of how this all works, and to actually just to talk through it's helpful.
Right.
So Bob, from all the surveys that have been done so far, what's the most provocative thing that you've seen emerge?
Well, at the end of the day, one of the most important questions in there is, do you have a written plan for the mental, to replace your work identity, fill your time, stay relevant and connected? Nobody does. I mean, it's less than 20% with our current, where we've had about 1,000 people go through it. So that's obviously a good segment, but it's still a small segment. And then I even question the people who check that box, because there's just not a lot of people who have done that. And then I still think, really looking at questions like what percentage of the U.S. population will be affected by the dark side of retirement? Where is retirement in the top 10 most stressful life events or not? And like just little low-hanging fruit that, I mean, I've written 800 or 900 articles. I've got so much content out there, but people still aren't getting the basic stuff. Because again, like, I don't mean to go on here, but when you look at the 4 pillars research, right? It is amazing research. Well, what are we doing with it? Like, great. Now we know from that slide that retirees are like, holy smokes, I should have done this. And pre-retirees like, who needs that? But who knows that? People who are financial advisors. And what are we doing about it? Apparently nothing.
Yeah, that's what I think is so interesting about all the research that's come out over the past few years that you've written about, I've written about, Bob Foley, you've written about it. If you read the research, it's all telling us what we need to do and what people need to plan for. But when you get to the end of the research, if you're a financial advisor, the next question that comes into your mind is, okay, this is great, but how do I implement this? And that's where I think a tool like the RQ assessment tool is very easy for financial advisors, for organizations, to offer to their clients and to their employees, because it begins that conversation that too often doesn't take place for people. They don't.
And it's not, it's not rockets. You know, I think that's the other thing. Like,
Yeah.
you know, there is some training if you want to be scored in the RQ, but the RQ, it's the follow-up is more important than the assessment. And that's what's really, really important here is I could score you on a bunch of stuff, right? You know, but really, if we don't then start to put a plan in place, to your point earlier, Bob, fully about in your 50s or early 60s, like don't wait until you're 3 months or 3 weeks away from retirement or 3 months into it to start to figure it out. You've got plenty of time, and just raising that, especially for couples, like couples, we both have great ideas of what we want, but no one's talking about. Well, let's put it on a piece of paper. But this is where advisors and organizations really need to affiliate with a retirement coach. And obviously, I run the Retirement Coaches Association. I train them on this thing. But, you know, I thought when I initially developed this program that, you know, who would go through the actual certification to be a certified professional retirement coach? I thought it would be a lot of advisors, but it hasn't. And they really want to, most people aren't hard and soft side. They're just kind of hard side. And so partner with an advisor. I mean, that's really what some of the stuff that you do read, like, and same with you, Bob, like partner with these people, let them be the experts, just like you outsource estate planning or accounting, like let them go through it. They've got the training and the tools. You don't have to reinvent it, but it's already out there. And you can have, you know, clients could go through the RQ, work with a coach, have a have a plan for the non-financial. That completely lowers the barrier to any financial planning because they're already in and they realize that money is only a component of it, not the only thing they have to focus on.
Well, we live in a just-in-time society that's driven by metrics. So a lot of the things that we're talking about feelings, emotions, and you know, thought processes. Those aren't metrically driven. You know, you can identify certain things from that area from a metric standpoint, but solutions you can't. And the fact of the matter is that we've almost become numb to basically seeking what our feelings and emotions are trying to tell us, and we almost go through with this phase of denial. So what's the best way, do you think, Bob, that denial can be overcome?
Just presenting it to them, you know, and I think the whole idea, the issue with retirement, you know, the softer side, the psychology of retirement, the non-financial, is that people have this perception that retirement is perfect and it's easy and it's going to automatically unfold. And so if it's perfect and easy, why do I need help with it? Well, it's not. And that's the whole point of the RQ as well, is to raise their awareness that retirement's empty. There's nothing there. Retirement is not a feeling. It will not make you happy. It doesn't do any of those things. It's just that you're not working anymore. What you do after is up to you and your plan. And so if you don't have a plan and don't have a way to replace your work identity for your time, it will get filled up, not by things that you like. And so you waste the first couple of years suffering in silence, trying to figure it out, wandering around, telling people, oh, retirement's the greatest thing ever. Wish I'd have done it before. No, you don't. Because what are you doing all day? And that's not to be harsh, but it's the reality that we know. And so you really need to wake clients up, you know, take away this glossy, beautiful thing, let them know there's some real stuff that goes on. And the better we can build up and prepare them for it, the better they're going to make the transition.
The final question, Bob, of the assessment asks the assessment takers, how well do you think you are prepared for the non-financial side of retirement? On a scale of 1 to 10, what have you seen so far from the results of test takers on that specific question? And does it surprise you?
No, it doesn't surprise you. It's funny because a lot of people score themselves pretty well. You know, so it's really the point that we, you know, I think we all go in, like there's some research about when, you know, high performing students go into a classroom of other high performing students, you know, 80% of them think they're going to get the best grade. Well, we all know that they can't, right? Same thing here. Like people go in saying, oh, I'm good. This is all going to work out. I feel good about this. And just because you do, or because you have enough money, doesn't always translate. And so it's heartbreaking at times, you know, to kind of break it to someone like you scored yourself as a 7 or an 8, you know, but your numbers say that you're an 850 or a 900. So there's
Right.
a to your reference, there's a disconnect in how prepared you are. And again, it's not meant to be bad or negative, but to really say you're thinking one thing, but your thoughts are vague in general. And if we can get more concrete, and I will assure you, if someone has or goes through a process to develop a written plan for the non-financial, they will score above 1,000, likely above 1,100 into the 1,200 category because they've thought through and they understand the pieces that we're asking about.
Yep, exactly. That was going to be my follow-up question is if they do score themselves high, is there a disconnect between what you're seeing on the results from the assessment?
No, from what we've seen are people who, when they're scoring high, they just have things dialed in and they live that, you know, because I think there's a big difference between good intentions and being intentional.
But on that specific question, if they score an 8, but they come back with a score of whatever 700 or 800 on the assessment, there's then going to be a disconnect between, because again, they're going to, like you said, perceive themselves as being better than average.
Yeah, so the people who score themselves high and also score well, they usually score themselves above the 8. So they're already at a 9 or 10. They feel really good about where they're at. And again, it's because they've been prepared. Now, obviously, some of the people who went through the first 1,000 are people who I likely know and have trained or been affiliated with. And so that can point to, that's why we need bigger numbers for longer periods. But, you know, the people who have gone through the CPRC process, you know, really get it on a different level because they've been guided through it. And so, but people who, the 9s or the 10s typically show up in the 1,100, 1,200 point range.
Yeah. Okay, good. So you had mentioned this earlier, but I wanted to kind of circle back to this. So the RQ assessment is focused on pre-retirees. So people approaching retirement who need to plan for the non-financial side. Are you still working on an assessment for retirees? Because that's the other group of people that also come to us seeking help, is the people like you mentioned earlier who've gotten into retirement, finally figure out that there's some struggles, that there's some things that they're having trouble figuring out. So is there an assessment in the works that retirees can take?
Yep. So we hope to have it actually launched by springtime. So,
Okay, good.
Ideally April, we want to start beta testing it because it's just, really we're just replacing we're adjusting obviously the framework of some of the questions, especially on the transition knowledge up front. But then obviously the work life is very different because you've got a different spin on things now with whether they did part-time work or volunteer work or where they're kind of spending their time. And so obviously we're close to having the questionnaire done, but then getting it online, scoring it and all that fun stuff is another thing. But we hope to have it by by April-ish is kind of the goal.
Fantastic. That will help a lot of retirees too.
Well, it's important because really, a lot of people even say, Bob, when should someone be doing retirement coaching? How does this work? And the real reality is, like Bob Foley said, like ideally in your 50s, because then you can really start planning out. If you want to live a successful life in retirement, start living it before you get there. Don't wait till you're there like, hey, now I got to spend time with the family, work out, eat healthy, get a volunteer. No, do it all before and take it with you. So don't wait. And then I think, but what we actually see is that people have that, oh my gosh, retirement's here. It's always been 5 or 10 years away. So now they're a year away. They're like, oh my gosh, what do I do? And then I'm sure you guys have seen these as well. You get the call from a son or a daughter or a spouse saying, hey, can you talk to so-and-so because they're miserable? And those aren't the calls we want, but that's the frame we're in. And again, we just want to have a tool for those people as well to kind of wake them up to like, oh, this is why I feel that way. Oh, I'm not the only one, because they're not. And retirement can be tricky. And so why not have experts who can help you in a tool to do it?
Yep.
Now, I know, Bob, that you're going to appear, I think it's in March, with Chip Conley's think tank. That's going to be in Mexico, isn't it?
Yeah, Baja, Mexico. So Modern Elder Academy. I actually think there's only 2 spots left. It's filled up pretty quick.
Well, they heard you were going to be with the main presenter. That was it.
So, but it's an exciting time because really, like, again, I think Chip has done a good job, positioning that whole thing, because this whole idea of midlife transitions, in my opinion, fits beautifully into the whole retirement coaching dynamic, because, I'm seeing more and more people, whether they're 50 or 55, just say, I'm not really retiring, but I'm done with my primary career. And so it flips to encore careers, having, more purpose and an impact. And again, if you can use the initial RQ or anything else to kind of nail down what's important to you, it's easier to figure that stuff out. And again, most people just don't have a way or a person to go to help them with that stuff.
Now, I know also that you're going to do a couple of mastermind meetings yourself for within the RCA in May. Why don't you tell us about that?
So we got a couple things coming up in May. So we wanted to find a central location where everyone could fly in on, less than coming to Ann Arbor, Michigan. So 2 retreats really for newer coaches or advisors who are looking to build their business around the non-financial. So kind of walking people through, how do you position yourself as an expert? How do you build your own first guide? How do you do these things? But then for the higher end people, obviously like yourselves too, who have, been down this path and been helping pioneer some of the things that we're doing, it's really about then best practices and collaboration. Like, how do we take this to the next level? Because the snowball is rolling down the hill and it's starting to pick up a lot of speed, and it's going to hit hard and fast. And then everyone is going to be scrambling on how to get on board. But we're really going to be talking about the best practices, thought leadership, and really having a bigger influence. And so 2 different scenarios. I believe it's May 16 through 18, but exciting opportunity.
Sounds terrific. Back to you, Reed.
That's all I've had. That's all I've got for today. Any final thoughts, Bob, on anything else you want to share about the RQ assessment, anything else in the retirement coaching space?
Yeah, so, for people interested, the website's just retq.org, retq.org. So pretty simple. You can search retirement quotient or retirement intelligence. It should pop up. There's some articles about there, but I would just say have some fun with it, because again, like, I think especially advisors are like, oh no, I'm gonna have to change everything. I'm gonna have to rebrand. And no, you really don't. You're just, what I tell people all the time is, you just want to say, hey, I want to make sure you don't run out of money, but also family, friends, good health, and time. And here's a tool that we use. Simple and straightforward. So I appreciate the opportunity, those guys.
Yep. Let me put up one more slide, Bob, with our contact info in case anybody wants to get in touch with us. Oops.
There we go.
So I don't know if is that an okay email, Bob, for people reach out to you? Okay.
That's perfect. Yep.
So I've got Bob's contact information up there, the websites for the RQ assessment, for the Certified Professional Retirement Coach, the Retirement Coaches Association and Wealth and Wellness Group. And then on the right, I've got my contact information and Bob Foley's contact information.
That's perfect. But Bob, how do you get all those things on one business card?
I don't have business cards.
There's the answer.
Right. Usually if someone says, like, do you have a business card? I'm like, if you give me yours, I'll send you some stuff. Or, I mean, really, I think the other thing is, like, if you do search Robert Loria or other stuff, you'll see plenty of articles. I've got a lot of free videos and other guides out there. And so just, you'll find a lot of good content. If you don't want to kind of jump into the certification or the RQ, that there's some great stuff out there as well.
Perfect. Great way to end it. Thanks, Bob, for being with us. Thanks for joining us on today's episode, everybody. We'll see you next time when we continue exploring the retirement and longevity planning beyond the numbers.